Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to start a brand new theme as we do on most Mondays, this one being one I think is going to be quite interesting. Based on other media, we're going to be looking at songs that are based on novels or television or paint or film or anything else that could inspire a song to be made. For the most, it's got to be media. We had this conversation actually. It can't be like a history book or history itself. It has to be it has to be fictional. I think that's where I drew the line. I don't remember. Anyways, media. It's got to be focused on media. Just try not to think too much about the gray area of what that might mean. Today we're going to be checking out some Slint. Now, I know we've listened to Slint because I recognize this album art, but honestly, I don't really remember what kind of music we're in store for. I'm kind of thinking something punk adjacent, maybe post-hardcore. I don't remember. We're going to check out Nosferatu Man, though, which is based off of the 1920s film, Nosferatu. So let's dive into it. See what Slint is bringing to the table today. There we go. So it's a 5. Yeah. Wild rhythmic phrasing. The drum part's kind of disjointed. It's very unsettling and noisy.
I start to smile with my smiling queen, who sits across the table by the food she made. Like a bat, I flushed the girl, and I blew out my back door. Night came, tomorrow was no more.
And the chorus is in 6. Oh, well. Okay, so the lyric delivery went back to the spoken word-esque verse stuff, but musically we're still in the chorus. This is going to be a tough one to dissect, isn't it?
I slink away from my queens.
Fun stop.
I can just settle down and be doing just fine till I hear that old train rolling down the line. Till I see disappear and set me in a world. But hope that beautiful flow. She set a fire to burning, and I railed on through the night. She set a fire to burning, and I railed on through the night.
Got to bring in that little bit of tension there.
She peeked around the corner. She offered me her hand.
So this is a bridge then?
Extra scared. And she was gone again.
So this is an interesting shifting time signature stuff. That is a very sharp tone.
Now my queen is lying in her early grave. After that girl, I'll keep it rolling. There's nothing left to save.
So that section was in 6, but the section before it was alternating groups of 8, 7, 8, 6, 8, 7, 8, 6. I'm surprised I picked up on that one, and I'm not 100% sure either. But I'm like 70% sure that's what's going on there. If I miscounted that or I missed the pattern of it, let me know down in the comments. That's it. A lot of silence, dude. But maybe that's the purpose of it too, because this song is very the word I keep coming back to, atmospherically, I think is isolating, but I'm not entirely sure that that's necessarily the way that it's not the word I want. There's definitely a feeling of aloneness, but I don't know, it's told through a different perspective too. The couple of phrases I picked up seem to have been speaking from the perspective of I don't know what the relationship is, but to bring it into something a bit higher level, like a predator and prey relationship. And I think that really leads into a lot of the feeling of the vocals. They're very low, gravelly, whispery, trying to keep the energy down. They're preying. They're trying to sneak up on something. But the music around it is tense, dissonant, noisy. Well, noisy, I think, describes the textures of the instruments, but it all comes together into something that feels very anxious and uneasy, very unsettling at times. And this seems to be from the perspective of the prey. So, in a sense, we do have a feeling of isolation, but it's a dual isolation, is kind of how I feel it. We have two people together alone. Now, granted, one of them's in danger and the other one is the danger, but I don't know if the characters know that. I don't get any information of that through the music. But I find that interesting. I can't wait to get into the lyrics on this one and kind of get more about it, because it could be that there's shifting perspective too that goes on that I'm completely missing because I only picked up a couple of lines here and there. But I do like that dual loneliness that I'm kind of picking up here. But it's also impossible to ignore the raw element of the production as well. A lot of this feels intentional, but I vaguely remember this also just being Slint. I got to go back and listen to the other one or two tracks we've heard from this album, which is called Spiderland. Maybe this is just their standard style of production, 1991. So, yeah, it's possible this is just how the song sounds. Oh, Good Morning Captain. That's the other track we did. Yeah. Um, I'll have to go back and listen to that real quick. Regardless, though, this song, whether it's intentional or not, is very gritty, very crunchy, very compressed. It also has sort of what I would feel is that black and white, snowy sort of sound that I associate with black metal. And I always assumed that was a mixture of the lo-fi with the tremolo picking and the 16th note picking and sort of, compressing that sound down just to the texture. But it's actually just that low to mid fi guitar sound, super crunchy, super gritty. It gives me a very black and white feeling on this song. Now, part of that, again, might be completely unintentional. It's just what they could do. But on the other hand, it reminds me of snow, of static. And this is based off of black and white film. So that's kind of interesting. It definitely captures sort of a high shadow type of visual language represented sonically too. Though I don't know how much of this is simply me being influenced by having seen Nosferatu before, and having that influence my understanding of the music. It's difficult to listen to something completely unbiased, especially when the title of the song references another media. And I'm like, oh, geez, so my mind's just going to jump between comparisons here. But a lot of this feels like that. It's also rather slow moving, a little bit like the classic film too. So there's not a lot that goes on in this track, but it does have progression through it. There's also the general contrast here. This is a rather quiet track, at least for most of the song. It bounces back and forth between lower energy sections and higher energy sections. Originally, I read this as verse and chorus, which is true for the first half of the track, but in the back half, it became linear. After the second chorus, we hit what I thought was a bridge, but it didn't take us back to a verse or a chorus. It took us to another new section. And both of these sections, in fact, the entire last 2.5 minutes of this track, are high energy, loud, gritty, noisy, distorted stuff. We kind of never go back to that lower energy part of the song, which could easily lean into a storytelling elements of, escalation, rising intensity, rising action. Actually, no, that's it right there. So if the beginning of the song is this cat and mouse, right? We have predator and prey, predator sneaking up on the prey. We kind of have this back and forth. Everything after that second chorus, including the second chorus, is just high intensity. This could be that, the prey of the story is. Oh, here's the other thing too. Let me finish that thought. The prey of the story is in constant danger. Maybe the danger's been revealed to them and they're trying to escape it now rather than just living their life oblivious to the danger that sits around them. But this is also based off of Nosferatu, which is a story about a vampire. So that whole element there of slinking into the shadows and preying on humans and all of that can really be brought up into the end of the song here and can be a reason for the elevation of energy and tension and stuff like that. The last thing I suppose I want to bring up, well, we got to talk a little bit about the guitar work, but I want to bring up rhythmic ideas here. The song kicks off in 5/4, which took me a second to get around to because it isn't one of the typical ways of breaking up 5/4, which is a group of three and then a group of two, or a group of two and then a group of three. It does start off a little bit like that, but when we look at the larger whole of a 10-beat phrase of 2 bars, we find that there's not so much of this relationship between the two. And I had a really tough time hearing out the 5/4. And even to this moment, I wouldn't naturally go in that direction. But you can count out 10 beats before the idea is looped. And so, I mean, it's definitely 5/4, but it's 5/4 by a larger scale nature. It's not something that feels like it fits into a 5/4 naturally. I find that to be interesting because it continues to capture the way that most of this song feels. They are in time signatures, but not playing rhythms that tend to match to those time signatures. The chorus is in 6/4, or we can view it as smaller groupings of 3/4. Regardless, though, this is the only place that I really think we have any consistency, because it's very easy to hear the groups of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's just that we don't hear a repetition until 6 beats. So that's why I kind of count it in 6/4. You can easily count it in 3/4 though if you like. We go back to the 5 for the verse. We come back to the 6 for the chorus. The interesting thing here, normally that I would note, is that the 5 would indicate some sort of feeling of incompletion, of less than. You're missing a beat, and we get that beat back in the 6. What could that represent narratively? But I don't think that's actually the case here, because the 5 doesn't feel like it's missing anything. In fact, it's really tough to figure out what the 5 is doing by itself, much less what it might be trying to do if it were something different. And so I don't really think that moving from 5 to 6 is supposed to feel like moving from less than to a fullness. I think the 5, more than anything else, is a feeling of off-kilterness, a feeling out of beats, out of step. It was really difficult for me to figure out what was going on there at all. It's a feeling of confusion given rhythmically. The time signature, I think, is less important than the rhythmic cadence of the instrumentation. And so when we get to the 6, I think it's not so much that it is 6, that it is even, that it is symmetrically divided. I think it's more so that it just follows a more traditional rhythmic pattern there. It could have been any time signature as long as it was easier to count, easier to understand. As soon as the chorus kicked in, my gut was like, hey, dude, we're in something standard. I started with 4, nope, went to 6, yep, that was it. Pretty straightforward. I think that's what it's supposed to be about, more so than time signature, focusing on cadence of rhythm, which creates a really interesting perspective for the back half of the track. Like I mentioned, the penultimate section bounces between 8, 7, 8, 6. It took me a while to figure this out, because once I hear the 8, I'm like, oh, okay, we're in 8. I count the next group. Oh, we're in 7. Okay, we're in 15 then, alternating 8 and 7. So I count the 8 again. Ooh, we're good there. I count up to 7 again. Oh, wait, we started early. What happened there? So now I got to figure that out. And it's once again a feeling of understanding the situation, and then having your rug pulled out from underneath you and realizing you got to go back to step 1. What are we really doing here? What did I miss the first time through? It could be a sense of an ever-changing idea. Maybe it's a constant shifting from safety to danger. I don't know, but it is a pattern. It is not totally linear metric movement, but it is constantly in flux. Every bar is different from the previous one, and that can be interpreted in a lot of ways. Now, I said I wanted to bring up music. This is going to be real quick, but I do think it's worth touching on. Every instrument in here does the thing. The drums are a little more complex than the guitar and bass, but the guitars and bass, they are all on the same idea. Usually it's a pretty static melodic one. You have your chord or your note. In the case of the bass, you just play it. You play a rhythm around it. You play that note. When the chord changes, you change your note, but you play the rhythm. And it's just very static, very rigid, very monolithic. A lot of this feeling of singularity. I find this leads well into this overall feeling of isolation, of loneliness. There's not much layering going on here. Everything just does the thing. There's not a lot of harmonic shifting in here. There's not a lot of rhythmic changes. There's no layer density alterations throughout this track. It's just the thing at any given moment. The real big thing I think that changes throughout the song is the feeling of the instruments. They start out a little timid, but still large for the volume of it. The big sections obviously feel big and gritty and bassy. But at the end of the song, I noted that there's a higher pitched not necessarily a whine, but a higher pitched trebly element coming out of the guitars. It's probably something that's EQ'd to really focus on that resonance, that frequency. But it stands out for a song that is very lo-fi, bass heavy, gritty, to have so much treble at the end. I initially interpreted this as some sort of scream. I'm curious where that sits with the story and if the story ever goes to the point where the predator gets the prey. And I wonder if the guitars are supposed to represent that. But it does stand out to me in a song so singular that the right guitar would have a timbre difference than the left guitar, and it would be one based in treble frequencies rather than mids to lows. Let me hit some lyrics on this and see what's going on there. Now, on the surface, this song seems to speak about a vampire, literal vampire who meets a girl and has to run away from her, literally turning into a bat at daytime in order to not be evaporated, destroyed by the sun. But then the next night, she finds him. And as verse 3 says, she peeked around the corner and offered me her hand. My teeth touched her skin, then she was gone again. The idea of the vampire drinking the blood from the neck of a human. Verse 4 says, my queen is lying in her early grave. After that girl I'll keep alone. There's nothing left to save. Which is interesting. This is where I started to see a more metaphorical area of this. Because otherwise, we just have a story about a vampire who seems to unwilling, he seems okay with the bite, with killing this girl. But he seems to be shy about it earlier. Verse 1 says, I live in a castle. I am a prince. On days I try to please my queen. Soon as I start to smile with my smiling queen who sits across the table by the food she made. Everything seems pretty good here. It isn't until the chorus 1 it says, like a bat, I flushed the girl and flew out my back door and I came to no one no more. Before verse 2 says that eyelids are open when the sun is high. I slip away from my queen's wary stare. So things were good at one time. Not so much anymore. But what really stands out to me is the final 2 lines. After that girl, I'll keep alone. There's nothing left to save. And this tells me that it's something deeper than just a story of a vampire. Which I do find interesting. We're going to stick on this for a second. It's called Nosferatu Man. It is, I would say, loosely based on the Nosferatu film, but it doesn't follow much of that at all. It just features the iconography of vampires. And of course, the male vampire biting the neck of a female vampire is the penultimate scene of the film too. So, I mean, I guess that is captured here as well. But generally speaking, this doesn't follow much of the film. It's just influenced by it. Or I'd even say just influenced by vampires in pop culture in general. But there is a second layer to this. This is about a person who got into a relationship and was exceptionally happy with it. But at one time they felt they were trapped. And so, as chorus 1 says, I flew out my back door and I came to no one no more. Basically saying I answer to no one. This is me. This is who I am. I'm not going to bow down to anyone else. Again, I want my freedom back. He felt constrained and trapped in this relationship. It says she ran without glances and railed like a red coal train, indicating that she chased after him. Now, if I'm dating a dude and he turns into a bat and flies out of his own house, I'm not chasing them. So on the literal level, I don't think that that works too well, but from the metaphorical angle of them just one night at dinner saying, I'm out of here, uncharacteristically, and leaving, yeah, it makes sense for the partner to chase after them. And then in this final moment, instead of the literal statement of draining their blood. It's more about destroying who they are. Maybe he says some really mean stuff to her when she finds him. He does something that changes her, that drains her of her essence. She isn't literally dead, but metaphorically might be quite harmed from this recent encounter, and he feels regret for that, feeling that all he can ever do is hurt the people that he loves. He says, "There's nothing left for me to save, so I will just stay alone now." Yeah, I really like that second layer to it, and I'm kind of upset that I don't see any annotations on Genius about it, because if I discovered the second layer, I feel like it's pretty obvious. I'm not a lyrical dissector genius, dude. I'm usually, I get the surface level stuff, and that's usually about it. So I might have to make a Genius account just for this track right here. But I like that angle. It is the feeling of being trapped by yourself because of your past actions, because you can't trust yourself with other people. And I think a lot of that isolation comes through in the music. Now, this whole predator prey thing, yeah, that didn't pop up too much in the lyrics. So I don't know. Maybe that is more influenced by the film than what the story they wanted to tell in the lyrics. And maybe that's another homage to the Nosferatu film. But I do find that atmospherically, the energy of this song is captured well, and works well to elevate the lyrics of this track. Those are my thoughts, though, on Slint's Nosferatu Man. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own interpretation or opinion on this track. Please put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.